think we're good to go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Colchester Borough Council Cabinet on Wednesday, the 7th of July, 2021. I'm just going to make a few brief announcements and then we'll proceed with the meeting. Firstly, actions in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, but if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Rundle Street. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available to listen to afterwards. I want to confirm that all of us present in the room are adhering to the relevant government guidance on COVID-19. I can assure those watching that the meeting room is set up to meet social distancing requirements. Whilst we are not wearing masks whilst seated, these will be worn if and when we leave our seats. A COVID risk assessment has been undertaken for this meeting. The use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is welcomed, but you are requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent and not to use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times, and I will just introduce the work of the Cabinet. And before I ask the members of the Cabinet to introduce themselves, I can clarify that Councillor Lissimore has sent apologies for the meeting, and Councillor Beverley Oxford is attending remotely because she is currently self-isolating. This means that although she can take part in the debate and answer questions, under the current legislation, she cannot vote. For the benefit of members of the public, I would like to explain that the Cabinet is the main executive body of the Council. It is responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all Council services and also makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet is made up of 6 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. My name is Councillor Paul Dundas. I'm the leader of the Council and Ward Councillor for Stanway. If we start going around this way, I'll ask members of the Cabinet and officers to introduce themselves in order.
Good evening, Councillor Darius Laws, Portfolio Holder for Economy, Business and Heritage, and the Rural Ward North Councillor.
Hello, good evening. Councillor Andrew Ellis, Portfolio Holder for Housing and Planning, and I'm the Councillor for Marks Tay and Layer.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Simon. Good evening, I'm Councillor Simon Crowe, Portfolio Holder for Environment and Sustainability, and Ward Councillor for Castle Ward.
Evening, Adrian Pritchard, Chief Executive of Colchester Borough Council.
Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. And if she's online, perhaps is Councillor B. Oxford like to introduce herself?
Good evening, Councillor Beverley Oxford, Portfolio Holder for Communities and Councillor for High Woods Ward.
I think you're on mute, Bev.
No, I wasn't.
Oh, somebody was.
You want me to do it again?
If you could, thank you.
Good evening, Beverley Oxford, Portfolio Holder for Communities and representing High Woods Ward, Colchester.
Thank you. 4 minutes in before you're on mute. That's quite good going, actually, isn't it? That's dealt with item 1. Item 2 is urgent items. Do we have any urgent items?
There are none, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest from anybody? No. Okay. And item 4 are the minutes of previous meetings. 2 meetings, Cabinet on the 26th of May 2021, which are very short minutes, and Cabinet of the 9th of June 2021. Have we any comments or matters arising from those, or are they agreed? Agreed, Bev? Yeah.
Agreed.
Excellent. Okay, and item 5, I did think about whether to perhaps change the agenda around a little bit this evening, whether to maybe get some of the matters of business out of the way and then have your say, because I thought that would take about 2 hours and have your say about 8 p.m. I don't know, but it didn't seem very popular for some reason. So I think we'll stick with the more established order, and we have 7 have your say speakers under general have your say. I'm sure you all know the format. You have 5 minutes, as I think they're all visiting councillors, and Councillor Harris is first. Sorry, 3 minutes. Sorry, beg your pardon. 3 minutes on this. I was being too generous there. Councillor Harris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you very much. 3 minutes is fine. I'll try not even to take that up because I know you've got a busy agenda. Nice to see you, Leader, and the rest of the Cabinet. I've got a couple of issues to raise with you. My first is on the finance, which is in your Cabinet notes and items. For me, the results of COVID on the health of our town has been sad. And it's been like that for a while now. I've lost friends and we all know people that have been affected, but it's cost the town dear, Leader, over finances as well, as we know. Could you tell me, Leader, what the current predictions are for our financial arrangements for the next year, 2 and 3 years? Because as I understand it, we are behind the cue ball, as it were, in many ways. And I wanted to know whether you had your finger on the pulse for that. The second thing I wanted to say, Leader, is over Middlewick. You'll know, obviously, I am a Beerchurch ward councillor. And I wanted to know if you, Leader, and the Cabinet would note that Beerchurch residents oppose the selling of the MOD of their Middlewick Rangers. And I wanted to know if you would, Leader, ask the MP Will Quince to use his ministerial influence to take that sale of Middlewick off the table, please, to make sure that we don't lose that asset in the Beerchurch and Old Heath wards. My final thing I wanted to say to you, Leader, is this. It's about livable neighbourhoods. And my real concern here is I wanted to address the Cabinet on this, and because the amendments to the original project sadly means that the amendments take Beerchurch and Monkwick out, and they've deleted those from the plan. That is disappointing to the very least, and I think, and leaves my community, our community, behind in climate change position opportunities. And I would ask the Cabinet to note this protest to this deletion of Monkwick from the area of the livable neighbourhoods. It's a missed opportunity, and I think we could have done so much more. I hope that's okay. I certainly kept within the 3 minutes, Leader, and that gives you a chance to invite other people to have their say as well. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I did struggle. I don't know if anybody else caught all of that. I got a couple of the questions. I think there was a question that the sound's very bad for some reason. I don't know if anybody else found that. I think there was a question on local MP and Middlewick. Obviously, I'm not the speaker for the local MP. He's made his views quite clear, and he can speak for himself. I personally regret the potential sale from the MOD, but of course they're motivated to sell it because it was placed for housing in the local plan. If it wasn't, then the value would be very, very different. They would either not be motivated to sell it, or we could perhaps look at purchasing it and using it for something better. So I think probably the people you really need to speak to are those who voted to put it in the local plan for housing in the first place. On the first question, which was relating to financing, I didn't really catch it. I don't know if maybe somebody did who can point me in the right direction. Mr. Pritchard.
Chair, I think Councillor was asking about our financial position over years 1, 2 and 3. And you have that as an item, don't you, on your agenda? So you might want to refer Councillor Harris to that item when you get to that point. But he was asking where we were financially in the next 1, 2 and 3 years. And we do know we have a savings gap to find.
I think that would probably be sensible. Yeah, my apologies that I didn't quite get it properly. But I think rather than repeating ourselves, we're going to talk about the MTFF under item 6 or 7, I think it is. So I think we'll do it then. And similarly, with the town deal board decision, I think if you can bear with us, I promise we'll get it done before 8 o'clock. We'll try and cover that off there, if that's okay. Councillor Harris, do you want to come back for your 1 minute on anything?
Only to say, Leader, that I'm just disappointed. I would hope that you would use your influence, Leader, with the MP, and I'm sure that more pressure could be put to bear on the MOD to stop that sale, which would certainly brighten the lives of the Beerchurch residents.
Thank you. I think I got some of that, but for whatever reason, it's really not coming through very clearly. Technology's doing well tonight. Okay, I think if that's okay, we'll move on to the next Have Your Say speaker, which is Councillor Jay Young. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Leader. I have two questions, or one comment and one question. I'm really glad to see that the investment in Greenstead is still captured in the town deal. That was very hard fought for, not only within the town deal application, but previous applications where that work was identified as a priority for the area. So just to say, you know, I fully support that. My specific question relates to North East Essex Parking Partnership, and in particular the impasse that we currently have and no chair in place. And I raise that with you because we're 2 months in now since the local elections, and I would have thought by now you would have determined who should be the chair of that committee. And in particular, the impact this is having on public safety. I listened to the recording of the last NEP meeting, which kind of Hanford Parish Council springs to mind, but no chair was appointed. At one point, Councillor Crowe was put forward, and then Councillor Lissamore, and then nobody seemed to be able to decide who should be chairing it. The issue I have relates to Bromley Road, and in respect of a development that's going on in the tendering area. But construction vehicles and people working on the site are parking on Bromley Road. What it needs is a temporary restriction there. But of course, we can't actually move forward and get that in place because that would normally be a matter for the chairman of the committee to take, you know, as a sort of urgent decision. And we have no chair of committees. So I'm urging you to resolve that situation so that we can actually make some decisions.
Thank you. Firstly, I would certainly agree with you on Greenstead and the town deal fund. I think it's certainly something I support and certainly join you in welcoming. On NEP, it's not a thing I'm familiar with. I don't know if anybody perhaps who is on NEP perhaps would like to explain what's happened there. Councillor Crowe, I can see indicating.
Thank you for asking, Councillor Young. At the meeting the other week, I can't speak for Councillor Lissamore. I don't know what her reasons were that she couldn't attend, but for myself, I was on a pre-arranged visit to my mother in Devon, who I hadn't seen for the better part of 18 months, thanks to this crisis. So I wasn't able to attend. An extraordinary meeting is being convened in order that a chair can be elected. So I believe that will happen very soon.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. That's certainly something we'll keep an eye on. It's good to see that it seems to be in hand to be resolved. On Bromley Road, I have seen some of the correspondence from our planning officers on that. I think that's probably something which, unless any members of the Cabinet wish to comment on specifically, which we need to perhaps take back to officers to get a proper answer on. Is that something we can make sure is done? Thank you. Councillor Young, do you wish to come back for a minute on anything?
Yes, thank you, Leader. So can I have clarification of who the chair of NEP is going to be, so I will know where to direct my inquiry to?
Well, I'm not sure that's in my or anybody here's gift, because obviously it's down to them to elect a chair at their extraordinary meeting. So I can't put a name in the frame and preempt or predict their decision. I think
but if I may, Leader, 2 of your cabinet members were put forward. So presumably you as leader knows which one of those 2 is to be the chair of that committee, or proposed to the chair of the committee, Councillor Crowe or Councillor Lissamore. Which is it to be?
I think we'll leave it to their meeting to decide, but we'll look at it. But I'm sure they're perfectly capable of working it out at their meeting. Okay. We'll move on to Councillor Goss, who is zooming in. from somewhere.
Certainly am. I have to say, Councillor Dundas, that was the best non-answer I've heard of the evening, but hopefully I'll get some clear answers. So good evening, everybody. Thanks for letting me attend. A few things I want to raise. Number one, grass cutting has come up as an issue, and we obviously had an update internally on what's been happening. I'm certainly aware that the grass cutting is down to the weather. The inclement weather of sun and rain are the perfect storm, the perfect for growing. All right, if you want things to grow in your garden, not so good if obviously things get out of control on our roundabouts and verges. But I do know ID Verdi are trying to do their best. Couple of points. Number one, there was some wrong information put out on social media by a party related to the administration, claiming that the previous administration had cut the amount of cuts, to pardon the pun, in the contract, which I confirmed to say that isn't true at all, and that the contract hasn't been changed. The same amount of cuts are still being done. I think it was 14 a year, if from memory or thereabouts, but it's down to the weather. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then the other point I did want to raise around quality of the grass cutting was the fact that, I guess because the team is under such pressure, the quality of the grass cutting is frankly in places dreadful. And I've reported numerous issues with the quality. And then the other thing that's very frustrating is they are not litter picking. It's in the contract, but litter is just being mowed up. It's happened down Cowdrey Avenue. It's happened on the Northern Approach Road. It's happened on other places that I've highlighted. I've even gone and litter picked it myself. Same where bushes have been cut back around Asda and North Station. A load of litter wasn't removed, and I cleared it on one of my Saturday morning weekly litter picks. As much as I'm extremely generous with my time, it would be good if our contract was being managed correctly and that the basics in the contract were being delivered. So I just wanted to make that public and make sure that it is picked up. I have raised it with officers, so they are aware. It's not a surprise. Second point I just wanted to ask about was fixing the link. We cancelled the elephant, the controversial elephant, and in place was being designed a greening route along North Station Road, which included planters, trees, and a new landscaping for the roundabout. Now, as I understand it, a camera has gone in on the roundabout today, according to a resident. There was meant to be CCTV put on the roundabout. That, I believe, has happened, or certainly something has gone on the Albert roundabout. I'm going to go down and have a look later on tonight, but something seems to have happened. But the scheme seems to have gone quiet. It was going to be done in November, in line with the planting season. So I'd just like to know what the administration has done with that, because it would fit in with the strategic piece that Essex is trying to do at the moment. So I just want an update on that. And then the third piece I was slightly surprised about in the budget paper you're coming to. You've reinstated fully the locality budgets for councillors back up to £2,000 each. Which is going to cost £51,000 if my maths is correct. I was surprised you didn't allocate that to the River Colne, because certain councillors, including Councillor Crowe, got quite animated on the River Colne. And I would have thought if you were concerned about it, or it was a priority with your £500,000, I'm surprised you didn't put money into it, because it is greening up at the moment with algae. Not as bad in previous years, but we also did agree it was an environmental issue, more to do with global warming and climate change. But I just wondered why you didn't take that opportunity, given it has been raised in previous years. It seems a bit like a missed opportunity when you had the chance in your 1 year of administration. But they're the 3 points I wanted to raise. I'll leave it there, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. I'll leave the relevant portfolio holders to pick up the first two. On the locality budgets, I'm afraid I didn't hear what your alternative suggestion was. I didn't really. Did anybody else hear it? Perhaps somebody could clarify.
Chair, I think he was talking about it perhaps being diverted to the River Colne and the issue on the River Colne, and therefore not 51,000 for locality budgets, but putting 51,000 towards work on the River Colne.
Okay. Well, what I would say on locality budgets is, of course, it's a maximum. No councillor needs to spend it. If they don't wish to, it can go back into general reserves and be reallocated. So if that was a commitment that the Lib Dem group policy is that you're not to spend the 2,000 and we should perhaps reallocate it back into reserves, I'll take that as read, and that's what we'll look to do. But perhaps I can go to other portfolio holders who may wish to pick up the first 2 points. Have I got anybody indicating? Councillor Crowe?
Councillor Goss's first point, I'm sorry, I don't know how much of it is my hearing or the sound quality, but I really didn't catch too much. Was he asking for an explanation for why we're behind on the grass cutting?
Sorry, Chair. I think he was talking about the fact that there were some social media issues which talked about reducing the number of cuts in the contract, and he was saying that the previous administration had not reduced the number of cuts. However, he was just talking about grass cutting and making sure that we're continuing with the contract as it is. I think was his point.
I'd rather listen to this at my leisure online and perhaps give him a written answer if he needs one, because I really haven't caught the thrust of that.
Thank you. There was a second question which I did pick up, fixing the link, and there was something about CCTV included in there. Does anybody wish to come in and comment on that? Or are we going to perhaps review what the question was and maybe see if we can come back with a written answer? Would that be a way to proceed? Thank you. Councillor Goss, you have 1 more minute.
As well, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Councillor B. Oxford wishes to come in. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm having a lot of trouble with my computer. Regarding the CCTV, it does come under my portfolio, but unfortunately I haven't had an update on anything regarding that. So I'm ever so sorry, Councillor Goss, I can't give you an answer about the CCTV on the roundabout. I do apologise, but nobody has spoken to me about it as yet. And I think that's probably it.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Goss. We'll come back to you now.
Yeah, no worries. I'll just look forward to the answers. It's a shame the sound quality in the hall is clearly impossible for people to hear. We can hear it well remotely and we can hear you. So clearly we need to sort this out for the future.
Thank you. Yes, I'd agree. It's been a bit of a struggle. But now we move on to a written statement, which might be easier to hear, from Councillor G. Oxford.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have a statement here from Councillor Gerard Oxford, which takes the form of a number of comments on the reports for Cabinet tonight. Item 7.1, para 631. I strongly believe each ward should produce their own list of sites that could be scarified and planted with wildflowers and plug plants that are managed ongoing. I think each ward list should be ratified by the Environment Panel, as the ward councillors know their areas best. This would lead to a borough-wide plan. Grass cutting. The grass cutting service isn't fit for purpose. We need regular cuts and trimming, except to all areas that the ward councillors have listed for scarification and wildflower and plug plants. We need to radically improve this service that so many residents rely on. I have been contacted by many residents on Highwoods who can't wait to see the improvements. The question is how much more needs to be spent on the service. Para 632, I totally support the reinstatement of locality budgets to £2,000 per councillor to use on ward schemes. 635, unless someone has evidence to the contrary, we are still a city, so why do we need to apply again? I suggest those opposed should provide the royal declaration removing our city status, if there is such a thing. 636, the urgent need for Colchester Borough Council to install commercial bollards that are not padlocked, as the police state bollards with padlocks are not good enough. We need to install commercial bollards to protect our assets. On item 8.1, para 8.5, given Holy Trinity Church is the oldest building still standing in Colchester, even predating the castle, we should protect it and not desecrate the graveyards by laying headstones flat and people walking over them or painting murals. I register a personal interest as my late parents married there in 1947. Turbulent streets worry me, particularly for visually impaired people. Youth facility, it's a good idea, but thus far no site has been found for it, nor funding, both capital and revenue, so further investigation is wise. And item 9.1, St Mark's Community Centre. As this is in our ward, and I have fought for this for over 6 years, I am delighted that this scheme is before you tonight. The trustees decided to go for a new build, so I support moving forward at speed to complete this project. I have to say I had support of former leader Councillor Corey and Councillor King, who agreed to my securing funding and not relying on Section 106, which all too often doesn't materialise. I'm delighted the new leader, Councillor Dundas, fully supports my scheme. I support the decision to delegate to the portfolio holder. And that's the end of the statement, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. Lots of good stuff in there. Firstly, on the grass cutting and the wilding, I'll let Councillor Crowe comment if he wants, but my view is that the wilding is something we very much support. But I do think what this year has shown is that it's very important that each individual ward councillor has some say and influence and are properly informed over which areas of their own ward are wilded. They know their area, and I think we need to listen to them more and actually tell them what's going on in their own backyard, so to speak. Councillor Crowe, is there anything you want to say on the grass cutting? Please.
So I'd like to thank Councillor Oxford for raising this evening about the wildflowers and the wilding. We're at the beginning of this process, and I'm as enthusiastic as Councillor Oxford to get this rolled out further across the borough. In fact, officers are probably already fed up with me banging on about it. But right now, it's important that we review and learn from what we've achieved so far. We're on a learning curve with a number of pilot sites which will produce valuable evidence about which management techniques are suitable for specific locations and conditions, which will allow us to monitor the results in terms of biodiversity, net gain, etc. So at this stage, it's very important that we don't overpromise and risk overstretching our resources. Now, there's nothing more I'd like to see going forwards at this time than allowing councillors to make a wish list. But at this moment in time, we just need to slow down a bit, see where we're at, make sure we know what we want to do going forwards, how we want to work it. And I can absolutely assure Councillor Oxford, our intention is that decisions won't be made without councillors being consulted about their respective wards and having their input. So I do hope that's what he'd like to hear this evening, and that goes some way to resolving his concerns. And I'm very pleased he's on board with us about this. This is a wonderful project that we're doing here, and it's going to have great benefit for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Any other members of the Cabinet wish to speak on this? No, I will just pick up on a couple of things. Certainly on St Mark's, I really welcome the fact that we're pushing ahead with that this evening. And I do think that's one thing which there does seem to be good cross-party support on. It was supported by the last administration. It's certainly supported by this administration. And I think our message is going to be, let's get on with it. On the commercial bollards, that is in the budget strategy item 7.1, where there should be some proper resources to put proper enforcement in. So that's certainly something we'll be looking to get on with. And I think, unless anybody else is indicating, I think we've covered off most of that. But thank you to Councillor G. Oxford for his positive comments. And we'll move on to Councillor Fox, who we might be able to hear properly. Probably our first contributor this evening, we can.
Thank you very much, Leader. It's very strange because we can all hear perfectly fine where we're seated. So I think people are a bit confused about what the technical difficulties are, but we definitely need to make sure that they're sorted for the future. Leader, you promised you would publish a 20-point plan for your new administration. Where is it?
That's a brief 3 minutes. I don't actually recall mentioning publishing a 20-point plan. Perhaps you can point me in the direction where I actually did that. But I think actually this evening we've got about 25 points and we've got many, many more points to come. So I think you've probably been reading, I don't know what you've been reading really, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you wish to point me in the direction of it, then I'll take a look.
I will happily point you in the direction of where there has been talk of a 20-point plan. I counted 16 points in the paper later in the evening. So perhaps you could point me to where the additional 9 are.
I'm sure if you stay right to the end of the meeting, which will probably be about 9:30, we'll make sure we find the extra 4 for you, and maybe many more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on, we have Councillor Gocher, who has a statement to be read.
Thank you, Chairman. Statement from Councillor Gocher. I believe that it is vital that the Council continues to support the Woodland and Biodiversity Project, and I'm very alarmed by recent online comments from a Cabinet member calling for increased mowing of wildflower areas, all in the spurious interest of so-called tidiness. We are currently facing a catastrophic decline in UK wildlife. Indeed, 41% of UK wildlife has declined since 1970, according to the 2019 State of Nature report. Some of this is due to increased development, concreting over the countryside, block paving instead of gardens, and also due to more intensive farming practices. As such, the leaving of some areas for wildflowers by councils is intended to create oasis areas for wildlife. We need to make it clear that for most areas, the council mowing pattern has not changed. Where it has changed, it is for the benefit of nature. A lady rang me up yesterday to praise the council for leaving areas near her home unmowed, as it has significantly increased the number of birds in her garden, and she also stated that it has reduced antisocial behaviour in the Castle Park area. We must set an example and challenge the idea that tidiness means killing wildlife. Yes, that means fielding off some complaints from residents about so-called scruffy weeds, etc. However, that is our job. We are elected to lead and to set an example. And that concludes the statement, Chairman.
Thank you. I mean, I said earlier, we support the wilding project. I don't know what social media comments the council is referring to. I haven't seen any. What I would say is what councillors have called for is areas which are meant to be cut. I'm not aware that any councillors actually from inside the cabinet or outside the cabinet have called for areas which are designated as wilding areas to be cut, unless I'm mistaken. Does anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Crowe.
Yeah, I saw a thread on social media today. If it's the same one, I believe Councillor Gocher is referring to, that the comments that were posted in that thread that have been taken from elsewhere weren't made by a member of the cabinet. And as Councillor Dundas just said, I think they were referring to cutting grass that's scheduled to be cut and not to cutting wildflower meadows or areas that are being wilded. And as for Councillor Gocher's other concerns about our intentions on this subject, I think at the last cabinet meeting, only a few weeks ago, I set out my stall about my feelings on the matter quite clearly. So really, he has nothing to fear. The biodiversity, the Woodland and Biodiversity Project has my wholehearted support. It has the wholehearted support of the cabinet, and there's cross-party support throughout the council. So fear not, Councillor Gocher. I think we're in safe hands here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I would also perhaps direct Councillor Gocher to the actual agenda pack this evening. I don't know if he's actually read it, but it contains a great deal on our commitments to wilding and the council's existing strategic priorities. So I'm sure he'll be very pleased if he does read it. Would anybody else like to say anything? No. Okay. We'll move on to Councillor Scordis, please.
Apologies, Chair. All up and running. So I come tonight to talk about the Hive and its potential moving forward as an area. You will all know where the Hive is in Colchester. Most of you know its history as the town's old port. Since the 90s, the industry from the area has disappeared and housing has replaced it. Even on the old site of Paxman's, we have a vibrant community living on it, what is now called Paxman Park. However, despite all the house building the Hive has seen, little, if any, investment. The quay itself has been neglected by Essex County and Colchester Borough Council for far too long, with no real plan in place. Much of the new housing has been taken over by student landlords, making the area very transient. Crime is rife as police presence is minimal, and graffiti is sadly a common occurrence that brings the area down. Despite having a train station, something of a rarity for most communities, that there are barely any amenities. Where has the 106 money from all new homes here gone? We know that much of the Paxman Park funding went towards improvements on the Rec, which is fine, as many in the Hive use the Rec. But what about the huge developments on Hawkins Road or even Hesper Road? In the Hive, we have what is known as the Moors, which is used as a main cycle route by many, but is also subject to littering, drug dealing, and taking, and a place for rough sleepers to sleep. At the same time, it's a beautiful, untouched piece of land with huge biodiversity. No one owns the land as I understand it, and one way the council could look to regenerate the Hive is to turn this into a nature reserve. Most importantly, we have a river, what many councillors agree is one of our best assets as a town. Yet we ignore this section of the river in the Hive, allowing it to be full of trolleys and other items dumped here. No effort seemed to be made to fill the empty units on the quay or look at building more units to regenerate the area. The creation of a Hive task force after my ward colleagues and I wrote to all partner agencies regarding the flooding is a very positive step. However, we need Colchester Council to have a vision of what it wishes the Hive to look like in the next 10 and 20 years. We're already facing an unpopular planning application for yet more student accommodation, which is already going to damage a local business in the Spinnaker. The Hive has the potential to unlock new opportunities for Colchester, but those opportunities are being missed. I would call on the Cabinet to work with the ward councillors for the area to look at future plans for the Hive and how we can help transform the area.
Thank you. I'll pick up on a couple of points and see if anybody else wishes to come in. Certainly on the Hive Task Force, yes, I mean, we've both been at the meetings and very, very early days, but we've got one small positive result out of it in the form of a 4x2 piece of wood, which should have been sold some time ago, I think. And we'll see where it goes, but it's good to see such good attendance at those meetings. The Hive, I would agree with some of your comments. I mean, I suppose I could say that it's good that it's perhaps been a change of administration, because it's probably only over the last 13 years, as you said, the previous council has neglected the Hive area slightly. I'm quite conscious of what it needs down there, and I will certainly take on board very seriously your comments that it should be a high priority for this council. Would anybody else like to come in? Councillor Ellis.
I mean, you've said it. I made some notes during that, Chairman, and I've said exactly the same thing. You've been in administration for 13 years, and you're complaining about what happened in the past. You've got a new administration now. You know, I think that I'm really keen on working with communities and councillors on planning and them being involved. That's why I love Neighbourhood Plans. I'm really happy to work with you on the Hive. I know you've got the Hive Task Force, but if you've got something you want to discuss and how you think the Hive could be improved, then of course we need to sit down and discuss it. So very, very happy to do that. I've lived here all my life. I've seen the Hive change quite dramatically over that time, and yeah, I'd love to be part of helping the Hive get better. So yeah, please come and see me. Let's discuss it.
I think Councillor Laws just wants to come in.
Very briefly, I thank Councillor Scordis for keeping us on our toes on this one. He's absolutely right. The Hive is a really exciting opportunity in the very long run. Rather than apportioning blame as to where we are and who's responsible, I would refer to the fundamental difference between the waterfront at Ipswich and the waterfront here, in that the Victorians had the foresight to build a wet dock, and we didn't have it. And if only we'd had that then, we might have a different functioning waterfront environment than we have now. We are where we are. I think all options should be on the table for the future. And it's something that I think everyone in this room really does care about.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. I think just one thing I'll add, I think, which came out of the last Hive Task Force meetings, I think we all agree one of the problems is that it's been a bit of a football, with everybody blaming everybody else, and also some major questions over ownership and responsibility. Now, we did agree that's going to be looked at. Of course, we might not perhaps like some of the answers we get in terms of who's responsible for things, in terms of ongoing costs, but I think it's important we sort that out, because if people keep blaming one another, say you're responsible for this, no, you're responsible for it, we won't actually get anything done. So I think that's an important piece of work, and I know officers within CBC have already got on with it. So, Councillor Scordis, you have 1 more minute to respond.
I think Councillor Ellis wants to come in quickly.
Well spotted. Councillor
I'll,
Ellis.
I'll just come back because you mentioned S106 and I hadn't picked up on that. Do you want me to go away and find out what happened to it, or are you able to find out? Because you're perfectly capable of asking the question as well, and I'll make sure you do get an answer. Or do you want me to go and find out what happened to the S106 for the area?
You're likely to get an answer quicker than I will as cabinet member, I reckon. So if you could find out from previous developments, that'd be really helpful, especially Hawkins Road, because it's dramatically changed. And just to follow up, Chair, I mean, the neglect, I think, has been longer than 13 years. I mean, I think it's been since it's been deindustrialized by different rainbow coalitions of many a kind, and arguably MPs of all different parties as well. So it's an area I want to highlight, want to improve. I live there as well, so I do have a stake in it. And the issue around the moors would be one I'd be very interested in looking at as well, about whether we could get that off the Crown and perhaps looking at enhancing it.
I would agree. I think the message is let's look to the future. Let's stop blaming for the past and move forward. Councillor Ellis actually just wants to come in.
I'll come back just on one thing that Councillor Laws has talked about, the wet dock and what have you. It was looked at. I know in the past we'd looked at putting in a barrage and doing something much more special with that part of Colchester, and I would love to have seen that, but there were massive issues, I think, over what was in the ground, effectively. I can see the Chief Executive nodding. If we flooded it and then it got emptied, which it would have to do at times, we would be pushing an awful lot of potentially pollutant through the oyster beds and what have you further downstream, which that would be disastrous for another key industry of Colchester. It's one of the things that we're known for. So it's really disappointing we haven't been able to do that, but it's something that was certainly looked at, Councillor Scordis. But we'll go away, do some work. I think it could be a beautiful area. Some of it is lovely. I think some of it, unfortunately, some of the planning that's gone on isn't quite so attractive, but we need to do the best we can to make it the best we can. So we will.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And I think that finishes the general have your say. Is that correct? Got no more speakers.
That's right, Chairman.
So we'll move on to item 7.1, and we have 4 visiting councillors speaking on this, and Councillor King, if you're there. We can see your name. Oh, there you are. We can see you now.
Thank you, Leader. This will be a test of the head kit I put on, just trying to help you out. This is the briefest of points. I just wanted to welcome, as you might expect I would, a report that shows the stability, despite the challenge set out in the medium-term financial forecast, the stability of the finances that are your inheritance as well as your challenge. I wouldn't have increased locality budgets, but that's clearly your call. And the reason why I wouldn't, and it's a serious one, is they were the only saving measure that we as members could agree upon last year. And we collectively put the burden upon our officers, and I know they're up for it, to find the savings that was required. And in welcoming the statement and welcoming sight of your future plans or your next steps, I thought it was right, and it's not that clear from the paper, to bring out that we have had an underlying improvement in our finances. We anticipated £1 million or so draw on reserves, which hasn't proved necessary. And of course you have, as shown, £500,000 allocated for new priorities. So I just think for once we can be positive with each other. I hope that I might persuade you to draw on finances and be brave and bold when we get to the town deal and parts of that in a moment. But I just want to acknowledge the finances in the paper and welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good constructive comments. I mean, the locality budgets, I know there's varying views amongst councillors on there, but we felt it was a way to get money very directly into wards. That money was set aside for COVID recovery, and they are, by their very nature, spent locally. They tend to be spent with local contractors, local people. They go directly into local communities, and they are spread throughout the borough. You know, by their nature, there's £6,000 for each of the 17 wards. So we felt that was an effective way to get the money out there. In terms of the overall position, I mean, as we know, this time last year, we were looking at a big deficit for 2021. We had more help than I think we expected from the government, considerably more help, but that still leaves a challenge going forward this year, as particularly as the import income support scheme finishes. Well, I think it's just finished on the 1st of July. But certainly, as far as I'm aware, and Councillor Lissimore could probably expand more on it, the return to our commercial income is looking quite promising. Car parking in particular, it's not back where it was, but it's certainly not below where we thought it would be at the moment. And of course, hopefully, after July the 19th, our leisure facilities will actually be able to operate at a profit. They can't operate at a profit simply because they can't get the necessary number of people in due to social distancing. So I suspect by August we'll have a much better picture of where we're heading on commercial income. Would anybody else like to comment on this? No, but thank you, Councillor King, for your comments, and I think we'll probably talk later on other items. And next speaker is Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much. I wanted to talk about some of the priorities outlined in the paper. At the last Cabinet meeting, Councillor Laws laid out the opportunity for the Council to bid for city status as part of the celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee next year. And Councillor Laws stated that residents would be consulted immediately to see if there was support. Tonight's report indicates a bid will be put together. Could you let us know what consultation was conducted and how much of the £125,000 budget will be spent on such a bid? And secondly, I wanted to talk about neighbourhood plans that have been extolled already this evening. And they were highlighted as you, Leader, as a priority for the new administration, and particularly for those areas of the borough that are not represented by a town, parish or community council. And why is there no mention of this in the report and any funding allocated towards them when we know that they do cost a considerable amount of money for communities to put together?
Thank you. I'll come to your second point first. On neighbourhood plans, it is something we're looking at. The challenge is in non-parished areas, you actually need to put together some sort of package to enable them to do it, because you haven't got an existing organisation. It's not like you can go to a body or something and say, we'll support you with a neighbourhood plan. If you've got a parish council, you can say to a parish council, if you want to do a neighbourhood plan, we'll try and give you the facilities to do that. So one of the challenges we're looking at is how to actually bring that about in reality. So there is work going on, and hopefully we'll have some more news before too long. And Councillor Laws, would you like to come in on the first point? Sorry, we did it backwards.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Yeah, you're indeed correct that at the last Cabinet meeting, I did suggest that we, as councillors, urgently needed to consult with our residents to ascertain whether or not there was a popular movement towards making a city status bid. I've certainly been doing that. I'm sure you have as well, Councillor Fox. And in delving a little deeper with officers, I've established that the original bid that was put forward back in 2012 as part of the Queen's last Jubilee, much of that work is still relevant, and the project, the bid was led by Destination Colchester, community interest company, of which it had officer support from us. The point you make about how much money will be spent on it, actually, I don't think that you need to be alarmed that I'm intending to spend every penny of what is being allocated in the budget on a bid application, but I do think it's right and prudent that we set aside a budget facility should, for example, we need to update photography, video, any collateral to support a bid. But I think in terms of the copy, and let's face it, you know, we've not got a new Norman castle overnight, and we've not got a new Roman circus overnight. A lot of what was in that report before is still relevant. The budget line you speak of is also to acknowledge that we may need to set aside some money to actually mark the event. And I wanted to give Council the option to be able to acknowledge the Queen's Jubilee by having a budget there, and that might well mean that you suddenly see some additional bunting or flags in the town to mark the occasion. But the detail will be worked through, but in principle, I was very keen to ensure that this borough did the right thing by Her Majesty the Queen and was able to celebrate it. And actually that our communities, who I know want to mark the occasion, have the opportunity for us to help them do that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Moving on,
Can I come back? Is there an opportunity? For me
not
to do
normally,
that?
but if you'd like to, on this occasion, if you'd like
Well,
to,
That's very kind of you, Leader. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say there probably are residents groups and other groups that might well be interested in developing neighbourhood plans. So I think there probably are some structures out there that do exist that people might be interested in if there was the funding available from the council to put together neighbourhood plans. And I would just note some caution in terms of a bid for city status. Councillor Oxford, obviously, is well behind Colchester's long-standing place as Britain's first city, and that's a fantastic accolade that we have. But there are, of course, many people who identify Colchester as a town, and for whom that identity and place is of vital importance for them too. And if a bid is put together, I would hope that it can generate sort of support across the community from those who perhaps have different senses of identity in Colchester's history. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker via Zoom is Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me, please. Given the time, and I'm sure there's people that want to be elsewhere, I will modify what I'm going to say. So therefore, I'd like to address items section 6, paragraph 6.3 relating to the increase in the ward council's locality budget, and I would like to welcome that. It's always been a useful resource for myself and my colleagues, councillors Pearson and Harris, and it allows us to continue to support our communities at a micro level. I'd also like to address you on paragraph 6.33 relating to your COVID recovery and strategic priorities. And I'd like to raise 2 points. Firstly, on your stated aim that any proposed development on council-owned land reflect the needs of local communities to create sustainable and affordable homes. Can I ask the portfolio holder, Andrew Ellis, to confirm if the allocation of genuinely affordable element, by which I mean social housing, of affordable housing will continue to reflect the needs-based banding as set out in the council's current choice-based allocation. And secondly, on the aim to improve access to public transport and active travel choices, could I also ask Andrew, the portfolio holder, to confirm if the council's commitment, which was agreed by the previous administration following a report from the working group that I chaired and supported by the then portfolio holder, David King, if the council's commitment to actively promote community transport to serve destinations where current private bus companies do not reach. I have in mind, and especially those people living with disabilities and limited mobility that cannot reach existing bus stops. And finally, can I echo my ward colleagues, Councillor David Harris' sentiments about the withdrawal of the funding for Monkwick on the living neighbourhoods. I would ask if at all possible that could actually be, reconsidered. I understand Darius has a long held desire to want to promote Jumbo, but the council has delivered on digital, or is delivering on digital connectivity within the ward, and it would be a shame not to go on and deliver on physical connectivity, given that Monkwick does actually have its challenges and often features on the indices of deprivation just below Greenstead. So if it is at all possible to revisit the funding on this, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warnes. Councillor Ellis, I think we'll go to first.
In answer to your first question, the answer is yes. If that's simple enough for you, Councillor Warnes, you and I know each other and you know my feelings on social housing. Second question, I'm not sure, was that really to me regarding community transport? If it was agreed with Councillor King, it would probably now be agreed with Councillor Lissamore regarding transport. I'm happy to pick it up. It's not something I have currently been briefed on, but it is something that I'm very keen on. So I'm happy to pick that up, but I'm wondering if it's the right portfolio holder to be pushing it to or asking the question of. Chairman, I will find out. Community transport is something that we use certainly in my ward. It's very important, or has been in the past. And if it's a commitment that this authority has made, then it's something that we ought to be trying to continue to do, in my opinion. You know that we want to do more as far as public transport is concerned. I've been talking about it like a broken record within Cabinet. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. I think we all know, because we've had a lot of discussions around this at scrutiny in the past, actually. One of the challenges is for a non-transport authority such as ourselves, the struggles around actually legalities of running bus services or controlling bus services. It's not an easy thing to do. I do hope, I know that there's the government's new bus strategy coming forward, and I assume there'll be some legislation at some point in the near future on that. I do hope that actually frees us up a little bit to actually be a bit more proactive in providing public transport, but we'll wait and see what happens. Councillor Law.
Chair, I cannot hear you anymore.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I said I cannot hear you. You appear to go on mute.
No, I can be heard here, I think. Can you hear me in the back? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Unfortunately, I did not hear your reply.
Did you hear Councillor Ellis's reply?
I did, but I did not hear yours.
My comment was simply about we recognise, and we've found in the past, and we've discussed this extensively at scrutiny, around the challenges of a tier 2 authority such as ourselves, who are not the transport authority, and about the legalities of running bus services, that it is a very complicated matter. And even though we may often have the desire to do things, it turns out that actually we can't legally do so. So it's not an easy subject. But what I did say is I hope that in the forthcoming government legislation on changes to bus provision, there is a little bit more flexibility around authorities being able to provide or encourage better public transport. I think there was also
Chair,
a question. Did you hear that?
Chair, would I? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Sorry. Would I be able to come back, please?
I'm afraid I couldn't hear what you said either.
I said,
we'll try and go to.
Would I be able to come back?
Who I think was going to answer part of the question, and then we'll come back and see if anybody's heard anything.
Councillor Warden, sorry, I'm really struggling with the audio. You're talking to me about some money for your ward that's not there anymore. If you want to write to me about this, I'll look into it. But I couldn't hear the detail, I'm afraid. So I suggest write to me about it. I'm very happy to come back to you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair, am I able to come back on your comments? Yes,
sorry.
I did, Chair. Am I able to come back on your comments?
Well, technically no, but we'll be a bit generous and say yes if you want to come back. We'll try and
Thank you.
hear you.
Thank you. Simply to say, if you could ask the portfolio holder responsible for transport, if it's not Andrew, then could they look into the acts governing community transport? It's not the same as for-profit passenger transport. Section 19, Section 20, there is a lot of scope to be able to promote community transport. And furthermore, the council undertook, and Councillor King will be able to actually verify this, the council undertook to actively promote community transport in its dealings, in its own dealings and those with the highway authority.
Okay, we'll certainly take that on board, and I think Councillor Crowe will look into that for you and get back to you with a written reply if necessary. Thank you for the contribution. Our next speaker is Councillor Pearson, also via Zoom. Councillor Pearson, if you're there, you are.
Evening all. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, my comment is merely in item 7 about the recommendation in 2.2 to use £500,000 of new homes bonus in the budget strategy. I note that previously the Conservative group has always been opposed to using new homes bonus in the budget. So I just wonder if this is an epiphany on the part of the administration, Leader.
Thank you, and congratulations for being by far and away the clearest Zoom contributor this evening. We could actually hear that. It was allocated in the budget last year. Of course, if we were going to make a major reallocation, then we'd probably have to put a new budget forward, and that would have a time issue. And we wanted to get this out there and underway as soon as possible. It was in the last budget as COVID recovery support. I think that much of this, particularly around the locality budgets, qualifies under those terms. I've long since taken the view that in principle, new homes bonus should be spent on mitigating the effects of new homes. But we are in the situation that simply taking it completely out of the revenue budget in 1 year and then putting it into infrastructure is impossible. It's something we would have to do over a significant number of years because there just simply isn't the flexibility in the budget to do that. So I'm not going to say it's an epiphany, but if we do try and reallocate some of it towards what it was originally intended for, then it will have to be over a multi-year scheme because it's simply not possible to do in 1 year. Because as I'm sure you would not support us, and I certainly wouldn't support us, making drastic cuts to services to enable us to do that. Would anybody else like to come in on that? No, thank you. Councillor Pearson, we don't normally have the right reply, but I've allowed everybody else to, so if you'd like to briefly, you're welcome.
Now, I have another question for the next item, so I'll hold my fire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think that is the end of have your say on that item, unless I'm mistaken. So we will actually move on with the substantive item, which is 7.1, which is Budget Strategy 22-23 and Transformation, which comes under the Resources portfolio. Unfortunately, Councillor Lissimore is not with us tonight, so I'm going to try and cover off some of it as best I can. And I'm sure she'll pick up anything in the future that she needs to. This is about taking what is a relatively small amount of money in the overall budget and trying to get it out there in the communities to bring about a bit of a boost for Colchester as we look forward to COVID recovery. It's not to change the world. We're aware of that. We're totally realistic. The locality budgets we've already spoken about. As I said earlier, I think they are popular with a lot of councillors, possibly not with the Liberal Democrat group. We may have seen some different policy there, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. But it is directly spent quite quickly by February out there in wards throughout the borough. We've made a commitment there, which I'm sure Councillor Gocher will be delighted about, with the wildflowering and open spaces. And we are committing to further developing the woodland and biodiversity project. We may look at the performance of that in terms of some of the tree planting, and that we know that we've ended up with areas with, want for a better description, of some dead twigs, which has not been a particularly good look. So we may look to reprioritise on actually surviving trees rather than just headlines about the numbers planted. I think the extra budget for neighbourhood services is needed. I think it's something we hear regularly from residents. It is probably the core service of a revenue service outside of welfare and housing for the council. And I think there has been a certain amount of frustration among residents about the difficulty in obtaining some equipment as well. So I think that's very welcome. The upgrade to the Shrub End depot, that's been on the books for a while. It's been held up for various reasons, but the message is it's much needed. So we're looking forward to proceeding with that. I'm delighted, well, obviously I'm delighted that we're expediting progress on the Stanway community facility. I believe the contract has been signed for that and is just awaiting the call-in period. So that's very good news. And we're looking at completion potentially around spring 2022, which I look forward to. I won't comment too much on St Mark's because I don't wish to steal Councillor B. Oxford's thunder, who will be discussing it under item 9. The unauthorised access to open spaces, this isn't going to cost an enormous amount of money, but there has been an issue. I've certainly seen the feedback from ward councillors on this, and actually it's cheaper to prevent it rather than try and sort it out afterwards. So I think a good audit of where our weaknesses are and the installation of some proper commercial equipment, which I know Councillor G. Oxford is looking forward to, I think will be a good thing. I think Councillor Laws might talk about multi-storey car parks in a minute. I won't cover off everything he's going to do, and I won't cover off everything which Councillor Ellis is going to talk about. So I think actually, shall we go round the portfolio holders? Would you like to in turn talk about features in your portfolios briefly on this subject? Shall we go in order? Councillor Laws first.
Just to say that as we build back from COVID-19 and as we reflect on the changes in the Old Town retail shopping experience, it's never been more important to do all we can to ensure that the public realm is up to scratch. That John Lewis experience from the moment that you arrive into Colchester on your bicycle, on the bus, in your taxi or in a car, and so the moment you park the car up at the car park to having your shopping experience and finishing it off with a coffee, a glass of wine, and a bit of cake and maybe a view at a museum first sight and going home. The town centre has to be an experience, and so I'm really pleased that we are able to put some money aside to find ways of improving some of the realm, albeit small ways. I'm very, very pleased about concepts around parklets and piazzas or public squares, and interpreting our heritage around all of that is absolutely key in defining the public space and making it a unique experience. So I'm really chuffed that we're all happy to proceed with that.
Councillor Ellis.
I'll be brief. We've spoken on one of the items already. The one that's got some money against it is enforcement. Enforcement is the backbone of a successful planning service in my mind. It's an issue I think lots of members have with enforcement or lack of enforcement because it's not properly resourced, or we have issues. There can be so many issues in enforcement. You need a number of people to deal with them, and a strong enforcement team stems from how it's resourced basically, and this just adds some resource. It means that we've got, at the moment, we've got a temporary enforcement officer who's been working with us. They were due to finish, I think, at the end of August. They're now resourced. The resource is there now for them for the rest of this year. And we're also taking on an apprentice, which I think has raised some eyebrows with some people. It's quite difficult to recruit to the planning service at the moment. It makes perfect sense to me to be recruiting young people. who are going to learn from the ground up. If we've got an apprentice, they can be going out and putting up site notices, for instance, when senior planners are writing reports. They can also be doing some of the paperwork whilst enforcement officers are going out and issuing stop notices or what have you. So it makes abundant sense to me to be doing that as well. So I'm delighted with it. I think we've spoken about the next item in a question from Councillor Warnes, and I know Councillor Fox is very aware of what we're doing there. And lastly, we've said, although we've already actually got budget for it, but I think we're just making the point that we are going to examine how we could create a nature reserve country park at Middleweight. It's not an easy situation, as you know. It's been allocated in the local plan, but I think it's important both for local people and ward councillors and indeed us as an administration to see if we can find a way to do that. So we are going to try and do exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Crowe, would you like to comment?
Thank you. I will be very brief because I've already had plenty to say about my portfolio this evening. I'm just pleased to see that we continue to take the challenge of tackling climate change seriously with the various projects we have going on with the woodland diversity project and continuing to push towards our targets for recycling, reuse, etc. And again, as I said, I'm pleased the council continues to take all this very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I think I should also perhaps just comment on part 7, which is the MTFF and the timetable. I think one of the critical things this year we're going to be looking at is the budget monitoring as to where our income is going and how we're performing against predictions, because like every organisation, it's difficult to predict. I think we're all fairly optimistic, but who knows what the next 9 months will bring in so many ways. What I would also just mention is that I know Councillor Lissimore will be restarting the budget workshops, which I have to compliment Councillor King on starting last year. I think it was a very good and useful innovation. And obviously that's something which all 51 councillors will be invited to, and I would very much encourage them to attend. A lot did last year. Sadly, looking at the last item on tonight's agenda, some didn't attend any, and I think perhaps they are the ones who are, across all parties, who are perhaps struggling a little bit understanding some of the detail of the budget. But unless anybody wishes to say anything more, I think that we should go ahead and look at the recommended decision, which is firstly to approve the budget strategy and timetable set out in the report, to agree the use of 500,000 of NHB carried forward into 21-22 as set out in section 6 of this report, and to approve the proposed programme to transform council services. Councillors, would we like to vote? Are we in favour? Agreed? Agreed? That has been agreed. So we will move on, find my agenda again, to item 8 and item 8.1, which is economy, business and heritage, which we have, how many do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 visiting councillors speaking on. The first of, and sorry, no, we have 1 member of the public and 6 visiting councillors. Member of the public, Mr. Nick Chilvers, if you're there on Zoom, would you like to speak? Good evening, Mr. Chilvers.
Oh, yes, yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can just about, yes.
Good. Let me know if you can't. I've not come here to pick holes in the TIP. It's a good result. But given the numbers concerned, there is a public interest, so more information about what we can expect will be welcome. And I'm particularly interested in Holy Trinity Church. It's close to where I used to work, and I believe that this is one treasure in Colchester overdue attention. And I'm looking forward to seeing the improvements. I'd like to know what the 517,000 is actually going to be spent on. So that's question one. Another question is Trinity Square. Could you define the area and tell me how it will change and what we can enjoy for the 500,000 allocated? Now, these are capital spends. We can't ignore the ongoing maintenance of the church grounds, which have been sadly neglected. It needs some trees cut back to let the light in. Bushes need trimming, attention to get grass and weeds so gravestones and paths are defined. Let's have some low-growing flowering bushes and more well-placed planters with seasonal flowers. Despite this being in a conservation area, it doesn't seem to have been on the council's to-do list. I doubt Bury St Edmunds would let something like this pass. You have the expertise in the Parks Department to sort this out if so directed. There are dozens of small landscape and gardening companies around that would make short work of this for a relatively small sum and maintain it for half a day a fortnight. Now, I read recently that a team has been formed to encourage pride in the town. Good, but to be at all credible, this Trinity Church and grounds has to be an obvious priority. In my book, you start at the centre and work outwards. And please stop it being hugged by market traders, except for Christmas market events. However, it should be the focus for Christmas lighting. It's an obvious one for something like art on the railings or something similar at a weekend. Let's have a bit more class and niceness and suppress the tacky and scruffy. The council's good at major projects, but little things like this is where you'll get brownie points from the public. We have a lovely park, but the love needs to be spread wider, and Trinity has been left unloved. And before you say there isn't any money, you seem to have no problem supporting major projects out of revenue, whether the public bother to use them or not. Now, the public, yes, do want to see pride in the town, and they also want practical action, not just words. And the council must lead from the front and not think they can leave everything to the bid. That also means badgering County, who are letting us down on so many fronts. So will you put more effort into and funds into maintenance of church grounds out of revenue or not? Now, one doesn't have to belong to an organisation to seek pride in the town. A lot of people that go into town every few days have the same feelings I do. I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chilvers. Some fair questions there, I think. Councillor Laws, I think you've got to reply to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chilvers, for your passionate speech there in favour of making the most of Holy Trinity Church. I cannot agree anymore. You have absolutely my support. We are going to make the most of that building. It is arguably, perhaps definitely maybe, the oldest standing building in Colchester. It's Saxon, it predates the Norman Castle. So it is incumbent on us, and we do own it, to make the most of it. I used to really enjoy the social enterprise coffee shop that was inside it and the vintage market, but that seemingly wasn't sustainable. And even though that operated and served a good function, there was the perennial problem of the heating and the energy efficiency of the building and the ongoing maintenance. And I know that squirrels were getting into the roof from the overhanging trees. It is clearly a building that requires maintenance. I'm really excited that the town deal board recognized that and want to put some money into it. The 500 and I think 17,000 you mentioned, I'm not going to itemize what exactly that's going to spend, because actually it's a bigger project than that. And it's my understanding, and I'm looking at offices now, that that money is actually to leverage additional monies to ensure that the building inside and out is maximised. You will note, won't you, that the railings are relatively modern, actually, and they were put there to deter the drinkers from the pub over the road who used to sit on there and get into the graveyard and get up to things they shouldn't be doing in a graveyard. But I love the suggestion about art on the railings. If it's good enough for Paris, it's good enough for Colchester. And I also think that it was a tragedy, actually, that the building was allowed to see its lighting disappear. It literally rotted into the ground. And so we are going to get that building lit up at night. It is going to look fantastic. And then in the very long run, the great news is that we have a partner in Community 360 who are going to be the occupant of it and look after it in the long term, actually, which is a fantastic way of preserving and enhancing an old building. Our old buildings have to live. They have to have a function and a tenant that can make them viable. And, you know, perhaps if 5 years ago a reputable national or international coffee brand had come along, maybe the council of a different colour at the time would have said, you know what, actually that's sustainable, that's viable, we could consider that. But it didn't happen. We have a solution on the table now. The money will leverage more money. I'm really open-minded about what we do with the public realm. I think it's fair. Sorry, I'm going on a bit. I think it is fair to have a conversation about it, because there will be some people that will want to perhaps let elements of it be a bit wild, like we've done with some of our churchyards. There will be others that will say, well, why can't we have some park benches in there and let people who work in the town centre enjoy their lunch in there? And I'm a big supporter, actually, in principle, that if you allow spaces to be unused and unloved, then rogue elements could get in there and they become misused. So for me, the sort of self-policing part of a space is allowing people in there to do positive things. So I think it's a really exciting initiative. I welcome all your comments. Please contribute continually, because actually I don't think that the budget lines have been clearly defined in terms of what we might do with the public realm. But it's an open door with me as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. A very comprehensive answer there. I hope that helps, Mr. Chilvers, and thank you for your contribution this evening. Is there anything briefly you wish to comment on? No, I don't think so. Okay. We'll move on.
Could I get a moment to follow up?
Yeah, if it's brief, yes. I didn't quite catch that, but if you want to come back very briefly, you're welcome to. You have 1 minute.
It will be brief. Look, you've got to think of it like this. Two women coming out the side door of Marks and Spencer's. One says to the other, they always keep that churchyard nice, don't they? But now they'd say, what a dismal, scruffy place. Not much pride there. Now, which would you rather have? And you need to do it soon. Not wait for the grand plan. Get the guys on that ground now and get it sorted out. It's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution this evening. The next speaker is Councillor Coleman, also via Zoom. Councillor Coleman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening. Just over 2 years ago, I introduced a youth zone to the council after I visited an amazing Futures youth zone in Barking. I brought it to the PPI committee and my fellow Lib Dem councillors supported it, in particular Councillors Corey and Councillor David King, who ensured it was included in the town fund deal. I will say that many other councillors from many other colours as well supported it. To be clear, that came from me and has been led and supported by the Liberal Democrat group. So what is a youth zone? I'm going to be clear, it's an amazing facility that changes young people's lives. That is a fact. It's a building, one building, where 8 to 19-year-olds can visit every day of the week and for 50p a visit. To engage in activities such as climbing, music, art, cooking, hair, beauty, fitness, boxing. It's got a sports hall. It provides mental health support, academic support, career support, just to name a few. And you can even have a hot meal there, the young people, for £1 an evening. A facility that gives young people the opportunity to meet others in a safe place, to learn new skills, to be supported, where they gain confidence and self-esteem. So what's the impact of youth zone on young people and the wider community? Well, there's a lot of evidence from the current 14 youth zones in towns across the country. Again, more facts. There's an increase in activity in young people generated by the youth zone. There's a decrease in obesity. There's improved mental health in young people, less antisocial behaviour, less grooming into gangs, less drug dealing, improved academic outcomes, improved confidence and self-esteem, improved life skills, improved employment opportunities. They're all fact, and they're backed by the police and health organisations, and many other organisations support them. Youth zones impact positively in so many ways. The impact on the town is significant, including increased footfall and spending. Too often I'm hearing reasons why we cannot put one in place. It's the capital cost, it's the site, it's the revenue costs. Well, other towns across the country have made a youth zone an absolute priority, and they are now reaping the rewards. We have the capital funding from the town fund. We have the site or two. You need to decide if you want a car park or a youth zone. I find it hypocritical that we have a climate emergency and a safer, greener, healthier strategy, but we put a car park before the youth zone as one of the sites. We can easily find the revenue, particularly if we want to prioritise our young people, and given the support that Onside provides and includes their gold, silver and bronze philanthropists who they bring on board. They're out there, I know they're waiting, and they're financially able to support a youth zone in this town. I don't want to hear reasons why not, or people being fearful of youth zone. I want to hear that this project is a priority for our young people in the borough and find solutions to get it built. Particularly gallings when I see millions of pounds in the town fund money allocated to projects that are the responsibility of Essex County Council highways. And as for allocating 1.32 million to the townhouse and the almost non-existent current youth provision, that's not an investment in young people. It does nothing to inspire them, nor does it attract external investment that Onside will bring in, around 6 million. I'm a teacher, I'm a PE teacher. I work and speak with these young people every day, and they want a youth zone. So please don't spend that money on something they don't want. Finally, I'm going to remind you of what was written in point 8.3 of your previous cabinet meeting, where it says, you are a council which is truly open in its thinking, embracing opportunities for change and innovative delivery. Therefore, I ask this cabinet to reconsider the town deal fund allocation and to find a way to ensure young people of this borough get a youth zone that they deserve after these last 18 months and for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. I don't know if anybody else, other visiting councillors, are also going to be talking about the youth zone, because it may well be better if I pick up that subject when all councillors have, visiting councillors have spoken. What I will just say is on the general merits of the youth zone, all the cabinet have had a tour around the youth zone, and I think, I don't wish to put words in their mouth, but I think they're all very impressed, actually, and share a number of your views. I've actually had subsequent meetings with them. I had a meeting yesterday with Onside. So we haven't given up on it, and we make it very clear in the cabinet report. I'll also just clarify one thing. It is not the cabinet's decision tonight to change or alter the town deal fund. What we are doing is noting it. The decision is by the town deal board, not by Colchester Borough Council cabinet. We haven't got the power to change it. It was made by an independent board set up primarily by an administration run by the Liberal Democrats. So, you know, it's probably something you need to talk about at your own. Oh, I'll give Labour credit as well. And we agreed with it. You know, it's an independent board, which I actually think has done a fantastic job, because it's been a very successful setup. And I'll credit Councillor King with doing a good thing there. But I think I'll make further comments on the youth zone when everybody else has spoken. Is that all right, Councillor Coleman?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on then to Councillor King. Councillor King, are you there still?
I am.
Oh,
thank you.
Good evening again.
Good evening again. I think it's probably best we don't have the debate about the independent board. I'm with you that that's not for now. You have what you have. You've had to cut your cloth to fit. I understand that. I also understand, I have to be frank, how the system will work. It's based upon advice which is from our officers. But what I would like to do is talk about the issues around finance, which are going to be real. Not the need and the benefits, which you're acknowledging, at least in part, and which Phil Coleman's described so eloquently. So let's just talk about the money. The capital cost is fixed at 8.4, and that will increase in years ahead. On-side raise half, 4.2. Our share should be reduced by contributions from the town deal. That's not going to happen now, it seems. Could come from the Youth Investment Fund, Levelling Up, or other sources of government funding, which we know could be accessed. We already have £1 million also set aside in our capital programme, at least we did when I was there. So any capital balance is small relative to our overall borrowing and our sound finances as described in your earlier item. And a context is useful. So what we're talking about at the most would be in capital terms, a tenth, 1/10 of our latest capital programme. The revenue cost is an issue, I know, as it's 1.3 million per year, but we also understand, and this has been proven time and time again, Onside will cover most of this by fundraising with just 400k a year from Colchester Council, and that 3-year obligation has been factored into the budget passed by full council in February. So I would argue genuinely, although it's a challenge, a youth zone is affordable. We can proceed, I suggest, with confidence financially and with confidence with regard to the youth zone model itself. Onside have fared very well financially through lockdown. Donations have increased, meaning all of the youth zones ended the financial year in a stronger financial position than anticipated pre-pandemic. Their model, public-private, has given them a reliable income and a freedom to flex in response to rapidly changing need. Their private sector funders have contributed more, so has government, both recognising the role youth zones play in meeting community needs. Most of those have also delivered essential food supplies locally, as well as providing online and welfare support. So I argue that what we have is something that works. Government's own additional support has been £6 million through DCMS, which has gone across to youth zones. So the model and our finances look, from my perspective, to be positive, to be doable. And that's the view of many others. We have to make our own decision, but Preston, Crewe, Barnsley, Thurrock have all recently announced their intention to develop youth zones, as well as more urban areas like Bristol and Brent, and cities such as Burton, as Brighton. So I think suggests that the issue for us collectively is one of ambition. Do we think our young people deserve a real step change, a real helping hand with their life chances? If we do, then we need to pick up the challenge of youth zones and act with confidence, mindful, as I say, that the model works. We get for a couple of million, an £8 million facility, and for limited revenue costs, which are real, we get a fantastic philanthropic model with demonstrated benefits proven over time. So I ask Council, as Phil Coleman has, that you commit to taking a Colchester Youth Zone project forward, irrespective of the town deal. The finances in the model works. If you do so, you will have my and widespread cross-party support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. So good comments. I mean, in the report, which we will hopefully approve shortly, we do make it clear that we are going to continue to look at the youth zone. We're not saying no to the youth zone. Let's be very clear on that. In terms of the figures, I'd agree with the figures you've mentioned there. The capital cost, or our share of the capital cost, is estimated to be about 4 million plus the cost of the land. The 4 million, the land's on top of that. We do have to apportion a value to that. Councillor is correct that if you look at a 50-year payback, it may be affordable. The revenue costs, the total revenue cost, as he said, is 1.3 million. They hope to have taken around 800,000 a year from other sources. If we're honest in terms of a round figure of what it would cost us per year, they're saying 400,000 a year now. we know where inflation's going on a lot of things, and then obviously we've got the capital repayment costs on top of that. So let's call it around £500,000. And it is a significant amount of money. In terms of the authorities mentioned which have built youth zones, all of those listed are tier 1 authorities. They're all unitaries or metropolitan authorities or county councils. Therefore, they have perhaps a slightly different financial basis than we do. I believe the only tier 2 district or borough authority which has either has or is developing a youth zone is Chorley, I think. I don't think there's any others in the country. So just to be clear, it is quite an unusual thing for a tier 2 authority to do. And I think we have a different magnitude of challenge to afford it than many of the authorities which have already done so. But I think I'll pick up on some of the general comments at the end when everybody has spoken. Does anybody else wish to speak now? No, we'll move on to, is that okay, Councillor King? Do you wish to comment on anything on that?
I'll wait the close. That's understood.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corey, if you're there. Good evening.
Good evening, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet. I just take up that last point that you made and say that Colchester has been leading in many examples across the services we provide and services where previously the administration that I led took forward and introduced new services or were one of the best in the country. So I would not diminish the ambition of this council and say that we can deliver a youth zone, whether we're a tier 1 or tier 2 authority. When I first spoke to you at the first cabinet that you held, I wished you well, and I hoped that you would continue many of our positive projects. The youth zone is definitely one of them. Councillor Coleman has spoken with absolute energy and enthusiasm and knowledge on this subject, and knowledge that comes anecdotally from his profession, similar to mine as a teacher, understanding young people and understanding the pressures upon young people at this particular time. For too long, we've seen reducing budgets for youth services, youth centres closing, children's centres shutting. We are seeing impacts upon our future generations now, and those are made even worse by COVID. We need to offer them healthy and hopeful alternatives, and the youth zone really is one of those. I won't go on about the attributes of it because it seems you are coming round to the idea of it being such a positive attribute for the town if we were to go ahead with one. We really need one now, which COVID has unfortunately accentuated the needs. And I was chairing a meeting the other day for the Alliance, which is part of the CCG and wider health system, where it's very clear that partners believe this is something we need. Partners from health, the police, education, the third sector believe a youth zone is the right thing to go forward with. We stand at a key fork in the road where we face an epidemic from mental health following the pandemic that we've had in public health. So I do really implore us to look at this. Now, you said you will, but we are losing an opportunity if we do not go back to the Town Deal Board. I say this from experience. I was Deputy Chair of the Town Deal Board. As leader of the council, I was on that board and had influence, as you do, Councillor Dundas. You have the opportunity to not note this decision tonight and actually go back to the Town Deal Board. I sent you a very constructive and supportive letter of how I would happily work with you and partners who do support this to ensure we keep the money where it is, the 2.1 million allocation that includes a youth zone, as was absolutely clear at the last meeting where I was Deputy Chair on the 29th of April. Unfortunately, on the 6th of June, where you were first attending, it was agreed that allocations would be removed from the youth zone. That is taking away the political will to deliver a fantastic project. As Councillor King said, the significant amounts of money have been backed already. External money will come in with this project. So the fact that we have those smaller parts of the project to put forward ourselves, that we have the capital money, we have 1 or 2 sites that we could deliver on, and we have or the last administration put in the budget pressure of £400,000 into the budget. So we have that opportunity there. The door is open. And I'm afraid by accepting the decisions of the town board this evening, you are letting that door shut. You are letting that great opportunity to deliver a youth zone go past. Politics is about the opportunities to make changes. It's about doing the art of the possible. I am not a dreamer. I'm not idealistic about this. I have been on the board in your position, leader. It is possible to go back and persuade our partners on the town deal board to make a different decision, to leave that money there in order to bring us so much closer to delivering a youth zone with our political will, with your political will, to get this over the line, to deliver a fantastic project for Colchester, for the borough, for all of our young people, for the future. Please take this decision this evening to pause it, to go back to the town deal board and say, no, this is not the right way. We need to keep that allocation. Councillor Coleman talked about allocations to the county council, etc. Things that aren't as pressing as something like this and aren't as so opportunistic in terms of the benefits for young people. Please take this opportunity to say, no, the political will is behind a youth zone. Let's go back. Let's deliver it with partners. I will support you to do that, leader.
Thank you. Some good comments there. If it's okay with you, I'll say the same as I have to the other speakers, because I think this subject may come up again, and I'll try and pick up all the points at the end, if that's okay with you, Councillor Corey.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Leader. I promise this will be my last contribution this evening. Time is pressing. The town deal is obviously very welcome for Colchester, but I have concerns about a different allocation, and that is the allocation of £500,000 for the former Essex County Hospital site. This is a site being developed by Essex County Council's housing arm, Essex Housing, and they had a planning application approved prior to the development of the town deal. And that planning application is for 120 houses, or 120 dwellings, a mixture of houses and flats. But the site has only been, they are only providing 4 affordable units on that site. That's 3% of the housing on that site, nowhere near the 30% target that this council has set for affordable housing, and nowhere near the numbers that this town needs to help support those who are in dire need of genuinely affordable housing. But the £500,000 allocation seemingly does not provide any additional affordable housing on the site. It just is allocated to provide some money for public realm improvements, but those were all part of the planning application prior to the development of the town deal, and I'm concerned that this is money that is just going to go into a pot to Essex County Council, that the people of Colchester will have no say over, and I suppose it sort of follows the concerns that others have raised about the allocation to youth services at Essex County Council that we see very little of in the town. I appreciate that the town deal board is a makeup of a range of partners. Of course, that was mandated by the Conservative government, even if it was put together with administrative support from the Borough Council. But the Borough Council is the accountable body for this money. And I would urge you to go back to the County Council and seek further assurances that there will be additional affordable housing on that site. I just don't believe that we can allow developments like that by another public sector organisation, a public sector organisation that is supposed to be looking out for those most in need in Colchester, and they're not living up to their responsibilities. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I don't want to speak for the town deal board, but I think when they were looking at the projects, I think deliverability has been probably one of the big factors as to some of the, in terms of speed and time, and some of the ones I looked at. Would anybody like to come in on this? No, not on this. Sorry. Councillor Ellis.
No, I said not particularly, actually, Chairman. I share your concerns regarding the affordable housing on the site, and I always did. Unfortunately, it got a permission, or rather, it got a permission without that amount of affordable housing because it wasn't viable without doing it the way they do. And as you and I both know, the first thing and one of the things that gets negotiated out on these deals is the affordable housing element. That's something that you, as the portfolio holder, I don't think you were the portfolio holder at the time, actually, so you couldn't probably stop it. You may have been, I don't know. And I don't know whether you went and argued for it. It's something I'm going to try and stop, but again, it's a difficult one. I am trying to get into that sort of development management team and understand exactly how these deals are done. It's one of the things I've worked on for the last 16 to 17 years as a councillor, and it always frustrates me that deals are done. And the affordable housing element seems to get negotiated out by developers. It happens. Yeah, you know that the Essex County Hospital scheme was a particularly complicated one as far as the county council are concerned, because it was with the NHS, and that money was going to the NHS. So that's why we are where we are. That's it.
Thank you. I mean, I think if I'm being candid, it's probably not my favourite line item in the town deal fund. I do understand your concerns, and I think quite a few people share them. I can raise it again with the town deal board and maybe question it again, but they were fairly set on it as being in there at their meeting. There was no dissent from many of the members, but I do take the point, and I do understand where you're coming from on that. Next speaker is via Zoom, and Councillor Pearson, who I can see there. Councillor Pearson, good evening again.
Yeah, I welcome the statement in this document that the town deal is around creating safe, healthy and active communities. My concern, however, is there's nothing in the town deal for one of the most disadvantaged wards in the borough, namely my ward, Beerchurch. As Councillor Warnes has already pointed out, if you look at most of the social indicators, social deprivation indicators for Essex, Beerchurch rates quite highly in those indicators as being an area of extreme deprivation. So I would just ask you if you could explain to my ward colleagues, Councillor Harris, Councillor Warnes, and also the residents of Beerchurch, just what you intend to do to level up this deserving part of the town.
Thank you. I'll have to check the map, but when the town deal came forward, there was quite a lot of restriction on the actual areas we could bid for. There weren't some areas included which you thought count the town. I'm not quite sure how far it extended into Beerchurch. I haven't got it in front of me. I'll have to look, but that may be one of the reasons why, sadly, although I don't particularly agree, you know, I agree with Councillor Pearson's comments, that it wasn't possible under the criteria to include many areas in Beerchurch, but I would have to check the map. I have seen it, but I haven't got it in front of me, and it'll probably take me half an hour to find it on my computer. But that's something I can certainly find out for you and get a proper written response, because I think it's a very fair question. Would anybody else like to come in on the other parts of the question? No, I mean, we do have another opportunity coming up, and there is the Levelling Up Fund. We're not bidding for it this year for two reasons. Firstly, we just couldn't get a bid together properly or in time. The deadline was the middle of June. Secondly, we are a tier 2 or category B, whichever you want to call it. And the criteria, tendering is category 1 or category 3, depending which way round you look at it. So we felt, rightly, I think, that the top tier authorities were likely to be favoured in the first round. We do hope to put a bid together for June next year. So I think that that would be a very good opportunity to include areas which weren't included in the Town Deal Fund, including Beerchurch, in that bid. And I would very much like to work with Councillor Pearson and his colleagues in looking at specific projects we can put in from Beerchurch. Councillor Pearson, do you wish to come back on anything?
Yes, thank you for that, Leader. I look forward to those discussions. My ward certainly could do with a bit of investment. The final point I want to make this evening is, will you join me and the Labour group in wishing the England football team all the best this evening?
I think that's probably the easiest question of the night, and I would be delighted to. Perhaps we'll just get to see the result at the end. Let's hope obviously I hope for many England goals, but I hope all the England goals come in the last 10 minutes, because that's probably the bit we'll get to see. So thank you. And our final speaker on this item is Councillor Scordis. So you've got 10 minutes, Councillor Scordis.
I brought my bike so I can cycle fast. Apologies, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers all involved with achieving this funding. It's impressive that we did so well. Obviously, it's disappointing we didn't get the full allocation, but we know we were against many other deals around the country. I have to say, like many others, I am shocked by some of the decisions that the Town Centre Board have made. I'm not surprised that many didn't dissent in the last meeting against funding for the county hospital, because I looked at the attendees and many were from Essex County Council. In fact, the majority were, including a councillor from Braintree, which I found very odd. I don't know why he was there. I think there's some self-interest in there. I'm not accusing you of that, Councillor Dundas, but I think, as has been recommended here, it would be prudent to go back to the town board on this issue, especially as your group has obviously been quite strong on developers not always paying out, and suddenly we're paying a developer, we're paying Essex County Council, who are going to try and make a profit from this site. So serious concerns around that, and residents are going to ask, why is money going to this site that the Borough Council doesn't own? I'm disappointed that St Botolph's is losing the funding for regeneration. Any of you who know the area knows that this is, for some people, it's their first vision of Colchester. They come in through Colchester town train station and they see an area that has empty shops, quite neglected, the paving's not very nice, there's lots of traffic, it's noisy, it's pretty run down. It's the rundown side of town, if we're being fair. And this was a chance to regenerate that, and I believe that would have made Colchester a better place, and I'm surprised some of the members on the board voted against that. I'm disappointed again by the livable neighbourhoods, and I imagine most of Newtown would have come under that, and we're trying to promote much more healthier living in that area, whether that's cycling or walking and so forth. So that is disappointing. I'd like to see that looked at again. It's great that Greenstead's getting the funding, but Newtown's closer and I think more amenable to some of these this funding. The other issue I had was actually around giving £1 million to a building that is owned by a private owner in Jumbo. Now, like Councillor Laws, I think Jumbo is a great asset to the town and would be fantastic. But why are we giving money to a building that we don't own? You know, is the landlord going to pocket this money? Do they have to spend it? Or are we taking on the ownership of the building? I mean, my belief is if we're giving someone £1 million, we should own the bloody building, being honest. Sorry for my French there, but we should own the building. If not, we should look at a community trust that does own that building and is accountable to the council, and we put safeguards in place that if that community trust does fall, the building comes back into the hands of the council, so it doesn't end up in the way it has. And if we should be looking at taking action against the owner because they've neglected the building. They paid 190,000 for that building and they're getting £1 million. So I think it'd be good to know how that's being spent. Is it going to be forced to be spent on? Will we possibly own it? And also, why is it being fast tracked? That just seemed very odd. Didn't seem particularly urgent compared to some of the other issues. Youth services, I don't need to go on much more. I believe Councillor Coleman has highlighted quite eloquently the merits of a youth zone and the fact that it would match up with the government's objective to level up. So really just to sum up, so I can go to see the football, is that really I'd urge you, Leader, to go back to the town bid board and as a cabinet vote for that as well, that we rethink some of these proposals, really seriously rethink, because I think there was some self-interest from some board members there and a lot of people have lost out here and we can do a lot better.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. I'll just pick up on a couple of things and I'll pick up when I actually introduce the item on some of your points and the points for the other visiting councillors. In terms of the attendance, I think the councillor from Braintree was there because they're the Deputy Cabinet member, so it's part of their portfolio. And, you know, sometimes we might love to hate ECC, but the reality is, I think, having ECC on board from the start with the Town Deal Fund bid, we needed their resources. We had, I think it's fair to say we had quite a lot of officer support from ECC in putting the bid together. And if we hadn't done so, I think the reality is we might not have been so successful as we were. With some bot-offs, I think, which perhaps contradicts some of the other comments. I mean, as far as I'm aware, ECC are planning a regeneration project there, and there's also quite a lot of S106 money potentially available. So I think that might be one of the reasons why it was taken out. I'll let Councillor Laws come in on Jumbo because it's something to be specialist subject, but on the spending of £1 million on somebody else's building, well, of course not. You know, I wouldn't support that for a moment. So that is not going to be happening. But I'll hand over to Councillor Laws.
Yeah, just to confirm, it is not £1 million going to the owner of a private building. It's my understanding that a conversation has been initiated with the owner of said private building, Jumbo, about the possible terms in which he might wish to relinquish ownership of it. It may be the case of a virtual freehold, it may be a freehold. I think it's an open, live conversation. The £1 million is there to leverage more money, significantly more money. I understand that the way in which the National Lottery Heritage funding modelling changed not too long ago, and it's made it quite hard for applicants to get money unless they are putting up a lot in the first place. So that's what this is about. It is my understanding also that the Colchester and North East Essex Building Preservation Trust, which has got people on far more qualified than me in complicated old buildings, and they are the guys that have put together the options appraisal on what the functionality of Jumbo could be. And I think that, you know, there are elements there that aren't set in stone at all. The guiding principle that I'm working on the basis is that we protect and preserve the building, give it a functioning use around it as well, and we get people somehow there in the sky enjoying it, enjoying the views. And I think that given that we have the Mercury and the Colchester Arts Centre, it really is the elephant in the room. We do have, I think, the once in a generation public now. I think we've got consensus for this building about the need to do that, and we could sit here and say it's not going to fall down, but actually, you know, we right to identify that we want to have some problems, and we've got to the point with it. So we, and royal we, there is a responsibility on this authority to try and come up with a solution and make Jumbos. I think this is it. I really do. I think this is the opportunity. And so I have no hesitation in supporting the budget of it, and to ensure that not £1 million going to the owner of a private building. But I very much hope that he was involved in the live discussions about what we can do there. But I don't think it's that, you know, than a restaurant in a start. We want a performance-based that run in conjunction and met with theatre and the arts. I think ultimately it's a really exciting opportunity. The second thing, like looking into culture and thinking I want to do that, and I want to spend my money just an academy would be good.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. But I think we're sort of halfway through this item, so if everybody's in agreement, we'll press on, if that's okay. I think what I'll do is we'll introduce the main item, and then I'll pick up some of the comments of the visiting councillors. Councillors, would you like me to go through this bit, and then you can come in afterwards? Firstly, I think whether we agree with the detailed decisions of the Town Deal Board or not, I think we should congratulate the people involved. It's been a sort of charitable thing they've done. It's, you know, they don't get paid for it. They've given up a great deal of time and put in a great deal of work. And they have secured, I was going to say 18.2, but they've actually secured £19.2 million for Colchester. And that is quite an achievement. So we really should congratulate and thank them for that. Now, of course, they may have got the 18.2 instead of the 25, but they haven't given up on the 25. The aim is to secure the whole 25 through other means. So work continues. On the youth zone, I'll address this first, and I think it's important that I lay out what the challenges are around a youth zone, not because I want to sound negative. I don't want to sound negative, but I think it's important everybody here and all councillors, if any are still listening, or maybe watching the recording, don't phone in and vote, as the saying goes, if you're watching the recording, understand what the challenges are. Now, the previous administration, I think were supportive of it, certainly from what I've heard this evening, were supportive of it, but the Town Deal Board had to look at the deliverability of each individual project and how realistic it was to bring them forward in a short space of time to be able to go to the government and say, yes, we can do it now, and draw down on the money. Now, the reality is the previous administration had not found a site. I know Britannia had been discussed, but they'd taken it off the table due to car parking revenue and heritage issues. At least that's what I understand the situation was. Other sites have been looked at, which on side do not feel are optimum. So at this moment in time, the 7th of July, there is not a site agreed or secured which is suitable for a youth zone in Colchester. That's a simple fact. On the capital, our cost is around £4 million. The Town Deal Fund would only have been 2.1 million, so we still need an additional 1.9 million. Now, it's easy if you say it quickly and say it's over 50 years, but we've still got to find it. And we still need to find the 500,000 per year. At the moment, it is still in the MTFF, but there's also a gap in the MTFF. So if we're to work together on this across party, let nobody kid themselves. If you want 500,000 for a youth zone, you're going to have to cut something else for 500,000 a year. And that may be services or something else we all like. So if we're serious about this, there will have to be some really difficult decisions all parties will have to back. On the other challenges, as I mentioned earlier, we are a tier 2 authority, and yes, I agree, we should be ambitious, and I actually take on board and I agree with Councillor Corey's comments that political will and political momentum are important. But we've just had Councillor Scordis talk about things that we shouldn't be doing, things which are ECC's responsibility. Youth service provision is ECC's responsibility. So this would be something which is not a core function of Colchester Borough Council. And that is something we would need to justify to our residents for spending their council tax on. We would also need to justify to other youth provision around the borough. I'm thinking, frankly, of home, I'm thinking of Stanway and places like Highwoods, where we have youth services who are regularly struggling for money, and frankly would grab your hand off if we offered them 10 or 20,000 pounds. So we need to justify in those areas of the borough, because it's not just about the town, and I appreciate youth zones have quite a wide footprint in terms of their appeal, but we would need to justify spending £500,000 a year in the town centre when other facilities are really struggling for money elsewhere in the borough. But as I said, I did really like it, and I think we all really liked it. And if we want to really get somewhere with this seriously, we will need to sit down and work cross-party and find a way forward. But I just wanted to lay out the challenges, and I wanted to lay out why the Town Deal Board felt they couldn't proceed with it, because when they looked at what CBC was saying, and yes, I am going to say it was from the previous administration, they hadn't got a site, they hadn't got the capital, and they hadn't found a solution to the revenue, which is why the Town Deal Board felt that it couldn't be a priority. I think that's probably all I'll say on it, but yeah, to all those contributors, let's see if we can set something up, but there'll be some difficult decisions to take. It will not be easy, and we will have to justify it to residents. I've probably said enough on that subject. Councillor Laws, would you like to come in on some of the more positive aspects of it? Because there are many positive things as well.
Indeed, and we've talked tonight about Holy Trinity Church and Jumbo, and I don't want to dwell too much longer on things, but to say that the money here is going to leverage a lot more money, and that's really important. The area of intrigue I've got is this idea of 2045 as a target date. I don't know what that means. I would understand if we said 2043 or 2049 with the 2,000-year Roman connection. I think that's something that might be worth considering for the board. But actually, overall, it's really positive that we're leveraging a lot more additional monies. This is ultimately nearly £20 million of money that we've been given to make the most of our urban and slight suburban centre of Colchester. So it is to be welcomed.
Thank you, councillors. I think Councillor B. Oxford wishes to come in.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, thank you. Oh, where'd it go? I had, like everybody else, the virtual tour of the youth zone, and wow, wouldn't you want one? Who wouldn't? The problem is, again, it's town centre centric. What about all the other youth provision that we have dotted over the borough that struggle and things? Why does it always have to be a major thing that is always in the town centre, as if other places just don't exist? Surely, why can we not, if we have this sort of money, why can we not improve the youth provision that we have on other wards, so everybody gets a little bit of something, rather than one big thing in one place that everybody has to travel to? And I am extremely concerned, like everybody else, about the continuing funding of it. Say we did actually put in a youth zone and it worked for a little while, and then all of a sudden people said, well, I'm ever so sorry, we know we promised you this money, times are hard, we're pulling out. And we could be left with something that we cannot afford, and then we are letting down the youth even more because we've promised them wonderful things and ending up delivering nothing. Thank you.
I think it's a good point to say. Yeah, just to clarify, the total cost per year of running a youth zone is estimated at 1.3 million. They reckon they can probably get about 800,000 of private sector contribution. Now, I'll take them at their word that they can get that, but obviously if they fell short, or I understand they would only be sort of 3 to 4 year maximum agreements. So as an authority, we would have to keep in the back of our mind that if they fell short on that, or those deals came to an end and weren't renewed, we could potentially, we've got to accept that the liability could be up to 1.3 million a year. So we have to be realistic about that. Does anybody else wish to say anything? Councillor Ellis.
Just briefly, Chairman, because I get exactly where people are coming from. Councillor Coleman's been incredibly passionate about the youth zone, and having visited one myself, I can see exactly. I mean, I came away from that saying I want one, but I do understand exactly what you're saying regarding the costs. I just wanted to address, or you maybe to address what Councillor Corey was suggesting about going back to the town deal board and whether you really have got that opportunity. As far as I can see here, they had an initial ask of £25 million and they're getting 18.2 million. So they've had to cut the cloth effectively to fit what we're able to get. Is that, have I read that correctly? Am I understanding that correctly? I think I probably am. And if I am, that's why we are where we are as far as the youth zone is concerned. And I think you explained that perfectly and simply this evening. It's frustrating. It's also frustrating that it wasn't really on my radar until we went and saw this thing. And I understand that Councillor Coleman brought this 2 years ago to Cabinet, and I've gone back and I've looked at what was said, but it's nothing that's been championed for the last 2 years or been a discussion within Colchester. And actually, I've had nobody saying to me, I want a youth zone. If they had, I think we'd probably be further forward than we are. And it's a frustration. Whether it was held close to people's chests, I don't know. I don't think it would have been done intentionally. But I just don't think we've had the conversation as a borough. And it's important. It's a huge sum of money. I can see it personally being incredibly effective and incredibly useful. But I absolutely understand why the decision has been made that has been made. But I do feel that we need to commit to doing some cross-party work to see if we can secure something like this for the town. I think it's important.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on that, I mean, I think there's probably two issues which will come up if we went back to the town deal board. But firstly, there's a time issue that obviously we want to get this underway and drawing down on the money as soon as possible. And that is a big driver from the government. If we went back and started changing things, they might turn around and say, well, actually, no, we'll just keep it the 16 million, rather than say, well, we'll swap it. And I fear that might happen. Secondly, I'll be honest, I think we'd be outvoted. Certainly from the discussions I felt the way, it was the first meeting I've been to, but I think for good reasons they made up their mind. And secondly, I'd actually have to go to them and say, persuade them it was deliverable in a very short time frame. And their first question will be, well, where's your site then? And the reality is I haven't got an answer to that. And we haven't got an answer to that as an authority, because and nobody else has come up with an answer of that, including the previous administration. I'm not saying it was their fault, because it may well be there wasn't an answer, but nobody can say, blame us for not coming up with an answer on the site in 6 weeks or however long it's been, when nobody else has come up with it in 2 or 3 years either. So rather than throwing city political brickbats around, that's something we all need to work on. So I'm not sure it's a particularly realistic thing to do, and my concern is it would backfire, frankly. What I would also just mention, you're quite right, it wasn't particularly on my radar, and now I'm thinking, oh, these are good. What I would like to do, and I am going to do, is encourage ECC to take another look at them and say, look, guys, actually go and have a look, because these are actually quite good things. And who knows? I think they are quite an open-minded authority these days, and maybe they'll have a bit of an epiphany, as was mentioned earlier. But it's very clear in the report, and the vote we're taking this evening does not take the youth zone off the table. It says we like a youth zone. It says ideally we want a youth zone, and we're going to work to find a way to have one. But I think in terms of getting this money, getting this 18.2 million and securing it, and we do need to secure it quite quickly, because otherwise, frankly, there's other people who'll have it. There's plenty of other authorities who'll say, well, if Colchester can't make up their mind or is coming up with stuff that they haven't got a site for, we'll have it. I think we need to accept the decision has been taken by a successful independent town deal board and note it and, yeah, say get on with it. So my feeling is we should accept the recommendation as in item 2 on this item, or section 2, and vote it through. Does anybody else have any more comments? So are we agreed that we accept the recommendations as laid out in the agenda papers? Agreed. Okay, and that has been agreed. And would we like a 5-minute break? No, I'm seeing nobody indicating for a 5-minute break. I'm guessing there's been no scores. So we'll move on to the next item, which is item 8.2, renewal of Colchester and Ipswich Museum Services Joint Committee Agreement, which is Councillor Laws. Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Leader. The unique partnership that Colchester has with Ipswich is an amazing example of cross-border working, cross-authority working. We are able to harness economies of scale because of it, not just economies of scale in terms of the obvious managerial and purchasing powers, the clout that we have because of this to attract bigger and more exciting exhibitions is evident to see. We have an amazing exhibition coming up in Decoding the Roman Dead, and in the long term, there is an aspiration to put on a gladiator-focused exhibition, which I'm really excited about. I know people in Colchester will be excited about. The Colchester and Ipswich Museum Service is not just about the artifacts and the treasures inside the buildings. It's about the buildings themselves, because they are in themselves treasures. And the service does so much more. It has the Portable Antiquities Fines Officer. So if you're lucky enough, Councillor Ellis, when you're digging up your potatoes at the weekend to find some Roman gold, then you are mandated under the Treasure Act to come and report it and declare that so that it may be recorded and appropriated. The service also helps our colleagues in planning in terms of archaeological impacts of new development. And I'm really pleased to assure you that actually there is a renewed focus, I think, in the service, in that we've made it explicit that there is an extra care about taking into consideration the opportunity of public realm and heritage assets outside of the museums. And I think that's really, really important. There is also a wonderful co-authored report on the Roman circus site, a management plan, which is a great piece of collaboration between the service and the Roman Circus Colchester Archaeological Trust. That is a wonderful thing. It's an aspirational document, and if Councillor Lissamore is listening, she will know that one of the aspirations within that is to potentially move a road in the end, which is aspirational, but one that we shouldn't shy away from. I'm really excited about the future of the service. I've got absolute faith in the team that are there, and personal shout outs to Lucy Bredman, Philip Wise, Frank Pipper, and all of the guys who've gone above and beyond, and they really have in recent weeks with their digital and online offering and some other extracurricular things that they've been doing. We are in an incredible position to have what we do in Colchester and indeed in Ipswich. Ipswich Museum was the first museum that I ever stepped into, and I remember seeing the Boudica statue and being quite terrified. And it's really pleasing to see that the Ipswich Museum is in fact putting in a bid for a big capital project to have some refurbishments, because unlike Colchester Museum, they haven't had them for a very long time. And I very much look forward to being able to have some coffee and some cake in Ipswich Museum in the future, which does potentially put the challenge back on Colchester, because at the moment, as you will note, we can't have coffee and cake in the Castle Museum, and maybe that's something we should look to do in the future. And maybe there are opportunities around the Claudius arcade nearby. Maybe there's opportunities around exploring what could be done in the chapel or indeed on the roof of the castle. I think these are all really exciting concepts to consider, but the fundamental report before you tonight is about the continuation of the relationship, which I think we should support and get right behind. And I can't wait to get in that museum and see the Decoding the Dead Roman exhibition this summer. So thank you, Cabinet. If you have any questions on any aspect, I'll do my best tonight to answer them.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. Anybody got any questions? Nobody's indicating. Well, the recommended decision, which is short and sweet,
Leader, can I come in at that point? Just on the recommended decision, could I make a suggestion that you amend it to tie in with the suggestion that is in paragraph 1.2, so you make it clear it's a renewal of the agreement for the period from the 1st of August 2021 to the 31st of July 2027.
That seems very sensible to specify the actual dates. Yes. So with that amendment, which is inserting the sentence in paragraph 1.2 at the end of paragraph 2.1, do we approve that? Are we agreed? We are agreed. That is agreed. Okay, moving on to item 9. I think we do have a public speaker on item 9.
Hello.
We have Jocelyn Law via Zoom. Good evening.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you
Hello,
for
you
letting
have
me.
3 minutes, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me attend the meeting. On behalf of residents in Highwoods, I'd like to welcome the progress being made on the proposed new community centre, St Mark's, on the site of a former rugby club ground at Mill Road. This facility will be an important addition to the community in this part of Highwoods and will complement the existing community facilities in the south of the ward, which make such a vital contribution to our community as a whole. Firstly, given the significant investment by the council into this centre on behalf of residents, I'd like an outline of how the council's involvement in the centre will be managed over the longer term. I see from the paper for Cabinet that the property is to be leasehold. And I wonder if you could clarify how long the council will retain the freehold for and what the length of the lease is likely to be. In addition, this new building needs to be fit for purpose and meet modern demands. And I'm pleased to see that it's going to connect to the heat network at Colchester Northern Gateway. But as well as being a sustainable building, this needs to be fully accessible to cover a full range of impairments and to be an accessible building for older and younger users as well. And so I'd like to find out what steps are being taken to ensure that the building meets the criteria of a sustainable development and will be fully accessible for all users. Finally, I'd like to say that I believe that health and well-being should be at the heart of our communities. And this involves things like helping and supporting our residents to stay active and tackling issues such as social isolation. Now, I think that it's great that St Mark's is planned to be a centre that encourages residents to participate in its management as a community asset. To ensure, though, that St Mark's meets the needs of all residents, can you tell me what measures are in place to encourage and facilitate inclusive and accessible consultation with residents at all stages during the development? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll probably let Councillor B. Oxford come in a second. I will just pick up your last point. I'm sure there probably will be a level of consultation. I've actually been through this in my ward with the Stanway community facility, which was very successful. But Councillor Oxford, would you like to come in on this one?
Yes, yes, please, Leader. Thank you. Thank you, Jocelyn, for your questions. It's nice to see that you appreciate all the hard work that has been done by the ward councillors in obtaining the building, a much needed facility for this part of Highwoods. This facility has been delivered by working with the council, ward councillors and the church. My Land Community Council was offered the running of the building, which unfortunately they declined. With regarding to freehold, the council will retain the freehold and there will be a long lease, possibly 200 years, but this has not been agreed yet. St Luke's Church, along with the diocese, will be responsible for the day-to-day running of the community centre. The trustees have made the decision to have a new build facility rather than a retrofit. So this can ensure that the building is sustainable with decent insulation and other green credentials such as the heat pump. As this is a new build, it will have to be compliant with building regulations and be fully accessible. There will also be a changing places facility and the trees will be retained. The council, the diocese, ward councillors and trustees that are made up of residents, St Luke's Church and Claire Williams of the My Land Community Council, but you haven't said whether you have spoken to her about this at all. We've all worked hard to keep residents informed and updated on the progress. Architects are currently working on plans which will be consulted on in the next few months. I hope that answers your questions.
Am I just able to?
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. You have 1 minute to reply if you'd like to.
Thank you very much. Yes, just quickly regarding the point about consultation with residents, I do appreciate that plans have to be brought forward yet. Obviously, during the pandemic, the consultation, there was initial online consultation, but I do hope that there's room to have more face-to-face meetings, just to make it fully accessible, inclusive of those that aren't so used to using online systems as the project is developed. And finally, I'd just like to pay tribute to the wonderful work of the Highwoods Community Centre on Highwood Square, its management and staff. It's a very valued community asset in Highwoods. And I know it's valued by so many community members. I hope that the new community facility might be able to cooperate in some way and learn from the valuable work and the great ways in which that community centre has worked, so that it can equally be a valued asset in the other part of Highwoods. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for coming along this evening, and thank you for being the only Zoom participant who has stayed beyond 8 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to the substantive item, which is item 9.1, St Mark's Community Centre at Mill Road, which is Councillor Oxford. Councillor Oxford, would you like to introduce this item?
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my banger thing. Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, obviously, this is going to be a fantastic facility for Highwoods. That part of Highwoods doesn't actually have anything. It doesn't have a local shop. If they need anything, they have to go into Tesco's. It doesn't have anywhere that is close for them to go to. So this facility will hopefully be used by as many people as the church can possibly get into it. As I said before, the church will be running this. They will have the day-to-day running. They will also hire it out, and they will also put the facilities in like mother and toddler groups and various other things that is so badly needed at the end of the of Highwoods. And apart from saying what a wonderful facility I think it is, it's a long time in coming. It was a long time to fight for, but we're getting there in the end. And hopefully it won't take too long before we see something going up there to help residents to participate more and have things that they really, really need. And apart from that, I think that's about all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I would fully endorse those comments. Any other cabinet members wish to say anything? No, I think we'll what we'll do, the recommended decision is to delegate authority to the portfolio holder for community use for the appointment of construction contractors and associated suppliers. This will ensure the efficient and timely appointment of construction contractors and associated suppliers where relevant to ensure procurement and programme timelines are adhered to. This will enable effective delivery of the scheme. Well, I wish them every success. I hope it is delivered quickly, and I hope we get on with it quickly. So that's the proposal. Are we all agreed? We are all agreed. That is agreed. Thank you very much. And I assume, are we minded just to carry on? We haven't got much left. Yeah. Okay. And we'll move on to item 10, strategy. This is actually my own one, which is the Member Development Group Annual Report, which I think I'm right in saying we are just asked to note. What I will comment on it is quite interesting looking at the figures. Of course, this year has been different in that the member development, well, it's been substantially online. It's been all online, but it's quite interesting to see that it's actually improved the figures in terms of attendance quite significantly in some cases. I'm not to go into individual councillor attendances, but there are some quite stark differences between some of the numbers. You know, I would genuinely encourage all councillors to attend some of these. I would particularly encourage them to attend the budget workshops, which Councillor Lissamore will be running later in the year. I think when we get to talking about council finances and things we want to do, and the compromises necessary to sometimes do them, and the difficult choices necessary, the more any individual councillor understands the makeup of the finances of Colchester Borough Council as an organisation, the better. So I would encourage them to attend those. It's quite interesting when our target was 80% of councillors attending one or more development sessions. The result was 90%, but that still means 10% of councillors attended none at all, which is perhaps a little bit disappointing. And if we look at the increase in those attending 5 or more, well, I think there's a clear benefit of the online nature of them there. I do appreciate you can't attend everything, and I do know with them being online, a lot of councillors do look at the recordings. Because the one thing with the recordings is you can't interact or ask questions. So, you know, they're better than nothing, but it's still better to be there if you can. So I think that's all I'm going to say on this item, unless anybody else wishes to comment. No? Well, I'll just check the recommended decision, which I think is to note it. To receive and note the report of the Member Development Group on the work of the group in 2021, and to agree that the council's reassessment for charter status should be scheduled for December 21. Are we agreed on that? We are agreed. Excellent. A lot of agreement tonight. That's good. And moving on is item 11, general. Well, I think anybody can do this if they want to. Is progress of responses to the public. Cabinet will be invited to note reports setting out the details of responses to members of the public who have spoken under have your say provisions at meetings of Cabinet and Council. Would anybody like to comment on this? No, I'm seeing no indications. It seems that where responses have been necessary, they've been made, and looking at the timing, they've been made in good time. In fact, they've been made on the same day, as far as I can see, that they were asked. So that's very good. Well done, officers. So we will just note this report. Noted. That's noted. Okay. And I do not believe that we have any confidential items tonight. Is that correct? So we have no confidential items tonight. And that is the end of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. I'm sure you'll be leisurely going home with no rush